document. Since we've been working with these pages based off of a tabloid sheet of paper, that's going to be my page dimension. So the first thing is you want to make sure you're set up for print. And then the number of pages, the way the number of pages work for this book is it's going to be in multiples of 4. Like we mentioned last class, every sheet, every leaf that you have gets folded in half. And so you've got 2 front pages and 2 interior pages. So each one of those leaves of paper is 4 pages. So 28 pages would be 7 spreads. And then the leaves of paper would be according to that. So I know I'm going to have 28 pages, so I can go ahead and put that in. And then the start page number is just the number that the first page is going to have. When I open this up, you'll see how the recto and verso pages are set up. Like I mentioned before with our Western books, the first page is always on the right side, so the recto page. And InDesign is going to set it up accordingly. Now, usually when you start a new document in InDesign, you'll get this option that says facing pages. Since you guys are working with spreads, you want to have facing pages. If you're doing a book where you're only working on one side of the page or you don't have full spreads, then you wouldn't do facing pages. So for a pamphlet stitch book, you would always want to have facing pages. The page, yeah.
The one that Aubrey's doing, the
Japanese. That one, it'll depend on how he's doing the pages. So we'll talk more about that next class. But that is an example, since those are individual pages. If you wanted to just have the recto pages with content and then the verso page blank, then you would only need to have individual pages. You wouldn't necessarily need to have facing pages. But that's a whole nother can of worms, and I just want to focus on this book right now. So I'm going to adjust the page size. This is the size of the individual pages, not of a whole spread. So for my book, it's going to be super small, but the width is going to be 2.75 inches. And it'll automatically convert it to pica for me. And then the height is going to be 4¼ inches. The number of columns, if I know I want to work with a certain number of columns, I can go ahead and set it up this way. This is something that I can adjust after I make my document, but if I know I want to have 4 columns, I can go ahead and put that in. I can also go ahead and set the margins up. I'm going to leave the margins as it is because I want to kind of look at my book size first and figure out what I want the margins to be. There's this button for more options. I can click on that and it shows me the bleed amount. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 3 points for bleed in case I want something to go like, so that's pretty much it. All of these options are things that I can change later, but it's kind of easier to just put it in at the beginning. So to see what all of my pages look like, I'm going to go over to the page menu on the right-hand side. And this will show me how the spreads are working. The first page is going to pretty much be the title page, so it's all by itself at the top. But all of the subsequent pages are paired up so that we have spreads. You'll notice that all of these pages have a little A in the upper corner. That means they correspond to this A master at the top. So anytime you want to make changes to the grid, the columns, if there's a certain item of text that you want to be consistent throughout all of your pages, you'll want to mess with it in your master so that way it changes it for all of your actual pages. So looking at the original setup of the document, I'm noticing that these margins are pretty large for this size book, which makes the columns super small. So I'm going to go in and change the margins and the column sizes. So I'm going to double click on the A master, and it shows me the two pages together making a spread. If I'm going to make changes to both pages, this is kind of a thing you have to keep in mind. Right now I only have the verso page selected, but I need to hold down Shift and highlight the recto page as well. If I don't do that, then I'll go and make changes and realize it only changed it to one page, and I have to go back and do it to the other page too. So if you have both those pages selected, it'll make the changes at the same time. So I've got those two pages selected. I'm going to go up to Layout and Margins and Columns. So here you'll notice that you've got margins for the top and bottom, and then instead of left and right side, I've got inside and outside. So outside refers to the outer edge of the page. For the verso page, it's the left side. For the recto page, it's the right side. The inside is the gutter. So I'm going to just make some adjustments. This link here, if that's selected, it's going to make changes to all of the elements in the margins option. So if I make the margin for the top 3 pica 6 points, it's going to change that for all of those dimensions. So if there's an overall change I want to make, I can do it there. But if I want to make individual changes, I need to deselect the link so it looks broken, and then I can make individual changes. So this is something that you guys will figure out as you're drawing out your layouts on grid paper. But I want a little bit more room at the top because I'm going to have a running header. I can have a little bit less at the bottom, and maybe I'll adjust the outside margins and the inside ones just slightly. Then the gutter here, so the gutter in this window refers to the gutter between each column. Right now that gutter seems a little bit large, so I'm going to decrease that. And now I'm ready to go with that layout. While I'm in this A master page, I'm going to go ahead and put in things like the folios and running headers and that sort of thing. So to put in anything that's based off of something like an item already in existence, like page numbers or the date or the time, I can set up text boxes in the master page and it'll automatically change them in my actual pages. So let's say I want my folios to be in the outer upper corner of each page. I'm going to go ahead and put in guides so I can keep that consistent. And I'm going to make a new text box. Now you will want to choose your typeface, your type size, when you start working this way. But I'm not going to just type in a number. I'm going to tell InDesign to put in the page number for the specific page I'm looking at. So for that, I'm going to have my text box. I'm going to go to Type and go down to Insert Special Character and then go over to Markers. And I want to select Current Page Number. When I do that, it puts in the letter A. That refers to the A master. But I'm going to put this where I want it to go. I want this to, in terms of the text box, I want the baseline of the letter to be at the bottom of the box. So to do that, there's some different alignments that you can choose from. If you select a text box, you'll get these options up here on the right hand side. It usually defaults to align to the top, so it's aligning more towards the top of the box. If you do center, it puts it more towards the center of the box. And then you have align bottom, so it aligns it to the bottom of the box. So that's something you can play around with to get the type where you want it in the box. So I've got the folio for the verso page. I'm just going to duplicate this and bring it over to the recto page, and I'll change the alignment so that if I can find my paragraph. I'm going to change this to align right so that it's moved to the right margin there. So now when I go back, are automatically put in there.
So what would happen if you did not duplicate and drag it over and just been like page 2, page 3, page 4, just going down?
Well, just you can draw a new text box and then insert page number, and it'll do the same thing. But by duplicating it, I don't have to go back and change the type settings or anything. Does that answer your question?
Well, what would happen if you did not even duplicate the second box or question? You just had that one A up there.
Then the page number would only be on the even pages
So
from the
like
left-hand side.
Spread instead of each individual page.
Yeah. And if you're going to have only one page number, typically it's on the recto page, because when we're looking through it, we're looking at that right side page first. So if you're going to just do one page number, I would have it on the right side of the spread rather than the left. That makes it easier for people to find the pages. We read left to right, but when you open a book, like I mentioned before, when we open a book, we look at this side first. So when we flip through, we're going to look at this side of the paper, or this side of the spread first. It would be really awkward for somebody to have to flip all the way through and look at the left page to find the page number. That's just kind of like, it's not a hard set rule, but it's kind of logical. Say that again? Well, that has to do with the fact that your page usually starts with the recto page, so the first page tends to be on the right-hand side. 1 is the odd number, so you'd have odd numbers going down the right side of the spread. So in the master, I can also set up running headers. So let's say that this is a book about type principles. I might choose another typeface, and probably before you kind of get into this process, you would already have chosen your typefaces. But I could set up some type, and actually as I'm looking at this seems kind of big, so I'll change the size of these, make it a little bit smaller. And maybe I always want the running heads to be in small caps. So if I want to change this to small caps, I can select the type, go over to character, and there's a drop-down menu on the right side, and I'll select small caps. Yeah, so there's also a type menu up here where you can get some different styles, but it's quicker to have your window up over here and be able to go back and forth while you're actually working. Yeah.
Now, this is going to be a weird example, but I know here when we were using the Potter books, every time you flip to a new chapter, it'd have a running header, but it would only be to that specific chapter.
Yeah.
So how could we like set it up to where that's on every page, but we can change?
There's two things you can do. So this is this would be the running head for the A master pages. I can make a B master page, and if I already have everything set up like I want it over here, just for the sake of demonstration, I'll also put like a rule at the top. I like dotted lines, so I'll put a dotted line. But I can go to my master page, and I can actually just duplicate this one and make a new master based off of this one. So I've got the A master selected. I go to the drop-down menu on the right-hand side and go to duplicate master spread A. And so it automatically names it B master. You can always go back and change these names. So if I control click on one of these, I can go to master options, and I could change this to chapter 2. And so now that's more specific, so as I'm going through, I know what it's used for. What was that? I mean, I don't know like a percentage, like out of how many books in the world, how many have different running heads for each chapter. I will say the longer a book is, the more likely they'll have a running head that corresponds to the chapter. For you guys, it all depends. Like you're probably only going to have one spread for each principle, so you could have the running head give a summary of what's on that spread. But if you did have a running head, maybe it's just the name of the book or something. But you'll notice like your textbooks, it would probably have a running head for that specific chapter or a specific section in the chapter. Sometimes what will happen is the running head on the verso page might be like the big book, I'll say the big little book of type. So that would be the name of the whole book. And then over here might be the name of the chapter. That's usually how that would function in a larger book. But you'll notice when I made the B master, the folios automatically changed to the letter B, which means that it's corresponding to that, that master. A little thing about copy and paste, so I added this running head on the Verso page. I can copy something just using Command C and then go to another page, but unlike some other programs, if I want it to be pasted into the exact spot I had it before, it takes a little bit more effort. So there's two ways to do it. You can go up to InDesign and edit and paste in place, and it'll paste it where it needs to go. If you want to use key commands, it's Option Command Shift V. So you have to hold down 4 keys at once. So just kind of get into the habit of that. It's different in Photoshop and Illustrator. They kind of have different key commands for that same function. So if you're trying to paste something but you want it in a very specific spot, then remember the paste in place command. All right, so I've got 2 different masters here. And if I want to change some of these pages so that they follow the B master, what I could do is select the pages and then use key commands to change the master that it's associated with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Verso page where I want it to start with the new master and hold down Shift and click to the Recto page that I want the master to end with. And then I'm going to Control click or right click and go to Apply Master to Pages, and I can choose the master I want to apply. So now when I go to those pages, you'll notice that the letter in the corner has changed. So instead of A, those have B, and then the running headers have changed according to what was in the master. Now there are other things that you can put into the master so that you've kind of got a standard to go off of. So let's say that you always want there to be a gray box on the Verso page in the A master. I can make that happen. So anytime I put something in the A master, it will automatically be put into the subsequent pages. So for example, when I go to click on one of the pages that have the A master associated with it, that box is automatically put in there. You'll also notice that when you have something that's on the master page, when you go to one of your actual pages, you can't move anything. So that's a good thing. It means you can't accidentally move a folio around or delete something that you don't mean to delete. But there might be times where there's something in the master page that you want to get rid of or you want to adjust. So to do that, you're going to hold down Shift and Option. Or sorry, Shift and Control. Come on now. Sorry, I knew it was Shift and something. Shift and Command. And then click on whatever the object or the box is, and it'll let you have access to whatever that object is. Shift Command and then click on the object. So let's say on this spread I want to have the gray box, but a full page, so have a full bleed gray box. And because of that, I don't want to have the folio or the running head on there anymore. So the only way to delete that would be to kind of unlock those boxes and delete them. So Shift Command and then click on the box and delete. And now I can go and expand this box. The rule I had, I still want that, so to bring that rule forward and push the gray box back, I'm going to control click or right click on the box and go down to, where is it? There should be an option to arrange these. Oh, I know why. Okay. So I'm going to go to Object and go to Arrange, and you should be able to tell it to send to back or bring forward, what have you. It's not letting me do that right now because that rule is still locked. So I need to Command Shift click on it, and now I should be able to send this gray box behind the rule. So now that's where I want it.
And it won't affect your main master page or any other pages that the master page is affecting?
No.
Just that
Any
page.
changes that you make to the pages in your book will not affect the master page. Also, if you go back and make changes to the master page after you've edited one of these individual pages, those changes will not be made. So if I go and, let's see, this was master A. If I go and make a text box, I'm just going to fill it with some placeholder text. Let's say I put this text box into this this page in the master pages. If I go back to page 2, it won't put it in there because I've already made edits to it. So it's only going to add that text box to the pages where I haven't messed with the original master page elements. But if I want to reapply the original master page parameters, I can control click on the individual page and go to Apply Master Pages and then just choose the A master again. And it should reset it. No, why it's not. Oh, there it is, because it's behind the box. Yeah, so if you do control click and then bring up the drop down menu, apply master to pages, then it'll reapply the original master to it. So are there any questions about the master pages? So for next class, you guys are going to start working on your type and color studies. And just to kind of help you guys understand why that's important, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about paragraph styles. InDesign has this great feature where you can actually save all of the settings that you have for individual types of text and apply them quickly when you're bringing in all of your text from, let's say, a Word document or a PDF. So over the weekend, you'll try out different typefaces, figure out what type you want to use for the headline, subheads. If you're going to have a running header, you might have a different typeface, folios. You're going to think about size when you set all that kind of stuff up. So what you would want to do is kind of come into InDesign and go ahead and set up those different type settings. And I'm just going to type these in. Let's see, subheader. So let's say these are the main elements. Actually, let me put this over here. Let's say these are the main elements in my my book. So the header, obviously, I want it to be a little bit larger, and maybe I want this to be in Helvetica New, so it contrasts with the serif typeface I'm going to choose for the body text. And it's in 12 point, so it's pretty large. Then the subhead and the body text, perhaps I want that to be in Garamond, but it's going to be a little bit smaller. And remember where we were talking earlier about type size, you want the difference, if you're going to have a difference in any type sizes, it needs to be apparent enough so that we actually notice the difference in scale. If the difference is too small, then it looks more like a mistake than something intentional. So I'm going to make the body text 9 points as well as the subhead. The subhead, since I want to differentiate it from the body text, I'm going to make it bold. The sidebar is going to be smaller, but it's also kind of extra information. So there's not going to be a whole lot of text in the sidebar. So this might be like definitions you pull out. It might be like a footnote or something like that. So maybe the sidebar, since it's not the same as the body text, maybe I'll have that in Helvetica New. But in, let's see, let me do light. And I'm going to have that at 9 points as well. Actually, and this is where like comparing your type comes into play, because even though the Helvetica New is the same, that Helvetica looks a lot bigger than the Garamond. So that might be one thing that I kind of notice as I'm working in my actual document. So maybe I make that size a little bit smaller so it compares more closely to the cap height of Garamond. So I've got all of that in place. What I also want to do is think about the leading and the spacing between different elements. So I want to have a little bit of space between the subhead and the body text. So what I'll do is go over to the paragraph settings. And we talked about this before when we were doing all those compositions. I'm going to change the space after. So that's down here in this option. Right now it's at 0. So I'm going to increase that to 6. So now, without having to put in a return, I've automatically got that space between the subhead and the body text. And then maybe for the body text, maybe I don't want spaces between paragraphs. I actually want to have indents. So to set up indents, I'm going to select that text and then go over to this box on the left-hand side and change the first line indents. And just like changing the size of the type, if you're going to have indents, you want it to be great enough so that it actually looks like an indent and not just like an extra space or two at the beginning of the paragraph. So I've got the indents there. Then I can also think about things like the baselines and the leading between lines of type. The baseline grid, I talked about that a little with the previous project. If you go to View and go down to Grids and Guides, you can turn on the option to show the baseline grid. And so it'll show up as these horizontal lines on your screen. Go to View, Grids and Guides, and go to Baseline Grid. Right now you can see that none of my text is aligned to the baseline grid. So to fix that, I'm going to select my text box and then go over to these two boxes at the lower right-hand side. And there's one where the two paragraphs are shifted. They're not right next to one another. So right now they're not aligning to the grid. I want to change that and choose the one where the two boxes are right next to one another. So it automatically shifts all the text to the correct baseline. Now let's say that maybe there's, I want a little bit more fluidity with the leading here. To change the actual baseline grid, go to InDesign at the top menu, go to Preferences, and then go down to Grids. With the baseline grid, you have this option of where the baseline starts. Mine starts at 3 pica, so it starts at the top of my my original columns, and then it's going to put a baseline at every 12 points. If I want to have more options of leading sizes, maybe I cut that in half and make it 6. So now it's going to put a baseline in between each one of those. So that allows me to make the leading a little bit tighter. One thing I'm noticing is that the leading for the sidebar text is a lot greater than what I have for the body text. So I'm actually going to go in and make sure that the leading is what I want it to be. InDesign, it will automatically change the leading according to the size of your type, but since you guys are designers, you actually need to be adjusting the leading on your own. So for the body text, I'm going to select the text and kind of see what happens as I increase and decrease the leading. So I'm going to leave that somewhere between 9 and 12. Seems like if I go higher than 12, then it increases the leading quite significantly. And then for the sidebar, I know I want that to be less. So I might have to change the type size a little bit. Huh, and it's still not changing. There we go. All right, so now that one is more of where I want it to be. And I can change the header one too. Might as well go ahead and make these all 10 so it's the same. So I have all of these settings set up the way I want them to be, at least for now. So now I can actually make different paragraph styles for these. So when I put in more text and I need to have a header and a subhead and define the body text, I can just highlight that text, click on a paragraph style, and it'll automatically apply these settings. So what I'll do is select the text that I want to make a style for, and then go to paragraph styles. If it doesn't show up, go to Window, Type and Tables, and go to Styles, and then Paragraph Styles. But I'm going to select the text and then click on the Create a New Style button at the bottom, and it'll just make a new paragraph style. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to change this to the name to header. And this just shows all of the options I've already made. Anytime I need to make a change, I would double click on the style and make the changes in here. If I just go, let's say I go ahead and save this, and I change this color, I'm going to get a little plus sign next to the style. And that means I've made changes that are not in the original style. If I make a change and I want that to happen every single time, then I would have to actually go in to the style, say go down to character color, and I'll choose a more tolerable color. And then it'll make that change automatically. So I'm going to do that for the subhead. I'll select the body text and do the same thing. And I'll select the sidebar and do that as well. Now if I go to another page and set up a text box, and I'm just going to fill it with some placeholder text. This text is the wrong typeface, it's the wrong size, like nothing is the way I want it, but I've got my paragraph style set up, so all I have to do is decide on which text is which, and then go in, select the text I want to apply the style to, and it'll automatically change it. And then maybe the sidebar text, I'll actually take that and put it into its own little column. I'm going to hide the baseline grid because it's kind of distracting. But maybe I put the sidebar in its own little column. and then apply the sidebar setting. Now I just put this sidebar in and I noticed that's not going to really work because that type is not, it's too big for that tiny little column. So I'm going to go back to my sidebar paragraph style and go to basic character formats and change the size. And you have to click preview so you can actually see what's happening. And maybe I'll make it 6 and decrease the leading. Maybe not that much. And maybe the leading isn't working for me here. So it's still applied to the baseline. I could go back and change the baseline grid again, maybe to smaller increments. Or maybe I decide that the sidebar isn't going to adhere to the baseline. It's going to be more fluid. So for that, I'll go to indent and spacing. And for align to grid, I'll say none, or maybe just the first line. And then I can adjust the leading accordingly so it looks a little bit better. If you have your document open and you get these frame edges, I know when I'm working, sometimes those can be distracting. So if you want to turn those off, go to View, Extras, and Hide Frame Edges. And those disappear, so they're not there anymore. If you also want to see maybe a better preview of what your book is going to be like, you can go to View and change the screen mode. So this is on normal right now. If you do preview, then it isolates the spread so you don't have the bleed on there or anything.
My computer, I know when I hide frame edges and I start moving stuff, the box moves, but the text will stay there. But when I'm in the computer line over there, it will like make a ghost form of the text in blue, and I can watch and see where the text moves. How can I set that up? Does that make sense?
I think so. I don't know.
Like I don't see, that's what it's doing like on my laptop. It just moves the text box, and I see where the text box goes, but the type doesn't really move with it. But over there in the computer lab, it'll like make a copy of text in blue, and I can literally see where I'm putting it, and then it pastes over there.
I wonder if it's a different version of InDesign.
It might be, but I just didn't know if you could turn that feature on.
I don't know about that. I'd have to look it up. But I'm thinking it probably has to do with a different version. All right, for the last few minutes, I want to show you how setting this up for printing works. So since you're having to print, you're going to be printing front and back, and then you're going to be folding your spreads in half. There's a special type of output that you guys would need to use. So when you're ready to set up your file to print, you would go to File, and instead of just going to Print, you're going to go to Print Booklet. Since my book is small, I should be able to print out all of my spreads onto letter size paper. And it'll set up to whatever printer you have defaulted. Sometimes you can actually, I think there's a way to have it save out as a PDF, but I'll get to that in a second. So the first thing I like to do is check the booklet type. So you guys would want to do the 2-up saddle stitch. Saddle stitch is just another word for the pamphlet stitch. There's other types of booklets that you can make, but I'll go into those with the other demonstrations. Next, I'll go to Preview. So this can show me how the individual spreads are going to be printed out. I don't want these just shoved up in the upper left corner because then when it gets printed, some of it might get cut off by the printer. So I'm going to go to Print Settings and go to Setup. Go down to Options. I want the page position to be centered. And I want the orientation to be landscape, just so that gives me kind of more room to play with when it gets printed. For marks and bleeds, I want the bleeds to show up, so I use Document Bleed Settings. And I would need to have... Yes, I'm pretty sure. All of these other settings are more advanced and for like mega offset printing. So you shouldn't have to worry about the rest of these. So when I go back to the preview, I see the spreads centered. Now what you'll notice is that with the preview, it's showing me the page numbers on each page. It's automatically putting page 1 next to page 28, which is the very last page in the book. So the title page and then maybe the colophon. And then what would be printed on the other side of that would be page 2 and page 27. So when I made this little book, if I were to take this apart, this would be page 1 and this would be page 2. Let me just write it down. So page 1, page 2, this is the second to last page, 27, and then 28 is on the back of it. So 1 and 28 are next to one another, 2 and 27 are next to one another, and then 1 is on the opposite side of 2, 27 is on the opposite side of 28. And then when I put it together, it all works out. So what this is doing is InDesign's doing all the hard work for us, so we don't have to mess with it. So if I go back to setup, you guys remember how I was talking about page creep? So there's this creep option, and that's where you can put in that information. And so it should automatically make adjustments for that when it gets printed out. You guys can see how with some of the pages, like this one, the line for the gutter is thinner. And then the more center pages, it's heavier. So it's making adjustments to the width of the spreads based on the page creep. But you would need to do some measuring beforehand to figure out what that needs to be. You might also want to just like print out some dummies and change the creep settings and see what it needs to be for that to be accurate. See. Usually there's an option for you to tell it to print as a PDF. Let's see. Oh, here it is. So let me go back here. Let's say I've got everything set up the way I want it to in the print booklet. You can just press OK on this box. And then there's this option for PDF, and you want to do Save as PDF. So find where you want this to be saved. And just save it. If you save it as a PDF, you don't need to package it. For whatever reason, it's not working on here, probably because I'm trying to show you guys and it doesn't want to agree. If you're going to just take this InDesign file and let's say put it in the printer in the print closet, then you would need to package it so that all of the images and the type is put together. So for that, you'll go to File and Package. And this will show you all the fonts used, it'll show you all of your images, the colors you've used, so on and so forth. And then you package it. Name it, and then it'll make a file where it has all of your images, all of the typefaces you've used put into one spot. And so then you'd have to take all of those files and put it on whatever computer you're using and then do the print booklet. Yeah, if you're going between versions, you have to go, I think it's File, Export, and then save it as InDesign Markup, so then you can open it in other versions. Because you can't even go from like InDesign 6 to InDesign 5. Or you can't, I don't even think you can go from like 5.5 to 5. So, are there any other questions?